The EU is getting increasingly fed up with Hungary, its refusal to take a share of migrants and refugees, and a whole raft of new regulations and laws. My guest here in Budapest is Zoltan Kovacs, the Prime Minister's international spokesman. How long is his government going to keep playing the bad boy in Brussels? Zoltan Kovacs, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
You're escalating rows with the EU and other bodies. You seem determined to take this to a major rift. Why?
We've used two words here, escalating
I've used
and rift. Yes, which
two.
I don't think are appropriate here because we see tendencies in the decision-making procedures, in the life of the European Union we don't like. We name that. That's been our policy making for the past 7 years.
There are major bones of contention, aren't there?
Yes, but the only way, in our belief, and that's our experience, to sort out real problems is to name them. And that is, talk about them in a frank manner, in a way that can ensure that at the end of the discussion, if you like a debate, a fierce debate at times, the solution is there.
It sounds very reasonable the way you're discussing it, but actually it's not getting any better, is it? And you yourself have said the fight is just at the beginning. The fight or the debate, as you called it.
Sure, but there are issues and topics in which we are going to be unrelenting.
So you're prepared for a major rift?
If we have to fight it, we are going to go for it. One lesson we've learned for the past 7 years, not necessarily in the field or by the topic of illegal migration, which is in the focus for the past 2-3 years, economic matters, our own constitution, it was worth taking the fight because at the end of the day it turned out that we were right, and though we don't like to be vindicated, that's not very wise if you are a politician or if you run a country, still that's a lesson we have learned for the past 7 years.
The EU Commission has launched infringement proceedings against Hungary, treatment of migrants and refugees. They don't like your March 2017 asylum law, restrictions on civil society organizations, legal reforms, the dominance of, as they put it, of pro-government media. These are serious issues, aren't they? And they're not getting any better.
We've seen so many topics, so many charges rather, against Hungary for the past 7 years that, again, this is nothing new. So we go for them because...
So you don't take them seriously?
We do. I mean, how can you take it more serious than you go for a legal debate? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be sorted out legally.
You went to the European Court of Justice?
Yes.
And they turned you down?
They turned down a question on whether it was possible legally to make a decision like that back in 2015 in face of decisions...
About mandatory quotas?
Yes,
for refugees.
in face of two previous decisions on behalf of the heads of state, which clearly said no to that. Now, we face a problem here. We acknowledge the decision because apparently legally it was possible to do so, but immediately we face a very serious political and yet again legal problem. And
you acknowledge the decision?
That's right.
Your foreign minister actually is on record as saying politics has raped European law and raped European values. This decision practically openly legitimizes the power of the EU above the member states of the EU.
And then
so setting aside that inflammatory language, what kind of EU did you think you belonged to?
Well, there we face a serious political issue which eventually becomes a legal issue, and that is how decision is done, how decisions are made in the European Union.
Well, you knew that. This is nothing new.
Well...
you knew that the EU member states have no legal right to resist those orders.
No, that's a real problem because that again goes against the most important word, idea, philosophy, if you like, within the European Union, that is consensus. If it's possible to go
You signed up to this. Members are required to accept the judgment of the EU's highest court.
If it is possible to go around, even legally, rightly, go around political consensus in the European Union, that doesn't make sense, does it? And that's what happened back in 2015. In face of
EU law takes precedence over domestic law in EU countries.
EU law is part of domestic law.
Yeah, you have to involve, you have to inculcate it into your laws.
If you wanted to engage in a legal debate, we all know that EU law is a particular law, as it is being called. It's not international law. It is, if it's right and lawful, it is incorporated into the member states' legal system. Now that's where we face a problem, because for the past 7 years, even more, we face a tendency, and that is the stealth mode of decision making, and the formulation and understanding of legal possibilities in the European Union's decision-making process that is tending to override what is in the treaty.
But that's nothing new. I mean, the other states have experienced that.
That's why
you didn't read the small print, did you, when you joined the EU?
If it's nothing new, for you it's probably not. For us it is, because there are limits, there are red lines we've drawn around.
And you've suddenly decided what they are?
No, we suddenly bumped into some serious problems, and that is our sovereignty here. Who shall decide?
Well, listen to the Brexit arguments.
That's right, but Brexit should be a lesson, actually, to the Brussels bureaucracy, because it's not a cause, it's an outcome of problems regarding the relationship of Brussels vis-à-vis London.
But you went to the court to see if they would overturn the ruling, the mandatory quotas. They didn't. So you accepted the jurisdiction of the court to do that. So and the court turned you down, and now you don't accept the result.
We have accepted. We have acknowledged the result.
You've acknowledged it, but you're not accepting it. We have changing your behaviour.
We have acknowledged that legally it was possible to make a decision on a temporary measurement, which we believe, again, politically is not right, because that goes against the consensus on a higher political level. We still believe that the highest political decision-making body of the European Union is the Council.
But my point is, you are not going to accept those quotas, are you?
We are not going to accept the quota, that's right.
Despite the ruling of the court
because
that you went to. You're bad losers then, aren't you?
No, the quota
you went to the court turned you down, you're a bad loser.
A bad loser would be who sacrifices lots of things in vain, but we are sacrificing lots of things for a reason, and that's a sovereignty issue. Even in a temporary decision, we are not accepting any compulsory decision, whom shall we live together in a country. We have never given up that element of our sovereignty, and we are never going to give that up. And we stick
whatever it takes, however far you have to push this.
We are going to use all political and legal means actually to go against that, that's right.
In March last year, your Prime Minister spoke condescendingly of flocks of obsessed human rights defenders feeling the overwhelming urge to reprimand us and make allegations against us.
Yeah, that's been the case for the past couple of years, that's right.
You join a club, you sign up to various commitments, they're going to review your progress. That's the point of joining the club. Why complain about it now?
I'm trying to...
Everybody comes under periodic review.
But I'm trying to make this discussion into something reasonable. It's our vision of how, say, human rights, how the soft elements of cooperation in the European Union, rule of law, constitutional issues, are based on principle. And
but you don't like being held to account, do you?
No, that's not the case. The thing is that
the obsessed human rights defenders. You don't.
We want to avoid.
You're kicking against any kind of review.
We want to avoid that something, an interpretation, is taking over the right sense of the word we have agreed to, and that's what is happening.
The wider point about this is that you don't feel that the Europe you joined is a valid Europe anymore. Your government now apparently sees itself as protector of European values. Your Prime Minister said 27 years ago, here in Central Europe, we believed that Europe was our future. Today, we feel that we are the future.
So why do you suggest what you've suggested here?
This from a man who boasted in 2014 of breaking with the dogmas and ideologies that have been adopted by the West.
Your question suggested something which is completely untrue. We are not breaking away from the European values and the perception we had. We stick to it, and that's the difference. Others are trying to make it something different. We have agreed to.
You believe that you are the future of Europe.
We believe that...
that's quite a tall order for one country, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, but Hungary is not standing alone. I mean, if you take a look at for the past, especially 2 years...
So there are other bad boys in the European Union?
You can name that, but let's talk serious. The Central European countries eventually, more than 10 years after their accession to the European Union, has come to their full-fledged perception of how they believe the European Union should be working. And I believe this is something new. The Western European powers, the Western member states have to cope with, and that is Central European countries, for an obvious reason, that is historical, sociological, economic reasons, a legacy we carry here, have a different say about how we think about the European Union. And you should better listen to it. It's not against Europe, it's a different, slightly different vision, actually.
The West should better listen to it.
Yes.
Why? I mean, the West is turning down what you stand for, your illiberal democracy. In April, even the centre-right grouping in the European Parliament, the EPP, which includes your party, Fidesz, warned you that it would not accept any basic freedoms being restricted or the rule of law being disregarded.
Nobody's restricting any freedoms.
They're not buying your explanations, are they? They're not buying it.
We've been through that for the past couple of years. And say in the economy, we were able to prove that we have to hang on in line with European regulations. As a matter of fact, sticking better or more to the regulatory lines or outlines that have been there than others, we are able to refurbish our economy. So there are lessons. Western Europe should, if not learn, at least take a look. Because
they took a look and they don't like it. In May this year, right. the Parliament condemned what it called a serious deteriation of the rule of law, democracy, and fundamental rights. Europe.
And so this is the name of the game. If it's about cooperation and discussion, at the end of the day, you have to reach consensus. It's impossible that, say, Western European countries, the biggest states, group of states, enforces something on others what they don't like. So that's not going to work. That's if you ask about the future of the European Union. They're telling you that you're a member of a club and the club has rules and you're not accepting the rules. But the rules should be based on consensus, aren't they? Well, they're based on majority, actually, aren't they? Again, consensus here is very important. You trumpet your European values and Europe is telling you we're not buying it. Political consensus goes beyond simple majority. Guy Verhofstadt, former Belgian Prime Minister, leader of the Alliance of Liberals. He's a great friend of Hungary, yes, that's right. Yeah, he said you signed up to the values of the Union, you have violated every single one of them. My question is... Mr. Verhofstadt is a great friend of Hungary. I'm being ironic here. He's been accusing us, he's been throwing us various things which have nothing to do with reality. But the thing is, again... He's not alone in that. In Europe... He's not alone in his criticisms, is he? He's not, but he belongs to one particular mindset, if you like. You, the human rights organizations your own NGOs criticize. The so-called liberal mindset obviously doesn't like what happens here in Hungary because we go against their dogma, which is trying to ensure that all achievements in the European Union are being called liberal. That's what we deny. Coming back to your illiberal part, you know, there's a very nice sentence on behalf of the Prime Minister, which took us a couple of years to formulate very shortly, but it's very nice. And this is, illiberalism is when it's not the liberals who win the elections. And I believe this is what we talk about here. Political differences, a different mindset is not supposed to override what the real nature of European decision-making and the future of Europe. And that is, everything is based on consensus, and consensus is more than simple majority. Mr. Kovacs, why bother with the EU? If you're determined to break with its dogma and ideologies, as you put it, why bother? Is it just the money, the 5.6 billion you get, 5.6 billion euros you get every year? Is it just the money? That's another favorite point which is being brought up. If you take a look at how Hungary is cooperating with European institutions and the European integration, you would be amazed, because Hungary... With campaigns like Let's Halt Brussels, Let's Stop Brussels... In most issues, I would rather say that 95% of those issues actually we have consensus on and we work together. Hungary is fully cooperating. As a matter of fact... You think you're worth 5.6 billion euros a year when you're running campaigns directly against the organization that gives you this money? You bring in here a topic which has nothing to do with human rights and the soft elements of cooperation in the European Union. The cohesion funds, the support Hungary and other European countries, mostly Central and Eastern European, but also Southern European countries receive from the budget, are not a gift. As a matter of fact, they go back to the very foundations of the European Union, and they tend to close, or rather that goal, that task is to close the gap between the development differences in the European Union. We have opened up our markets in a disadvantaged position for the Western European countries. You've opened up your market. You're staging what your Prime Minister called a revolution against the alliance of the bureaucrats of Brussels, the liberal media,
and the insatiable financiers. If it's all so rotten in Brussels and the financiers are so insatiable, why keep on taking their money?
Have you ever been involved in running a state, even say a town or a larger bureaucratic body? You know that going against bureaucracy is a legitimate goal. Bureaucracy tends to
You paint Brussels as rotten.
Yes, because in many respects, what they
so why
represent.
Stay with it? Why stay with it?
Again, you put a
Go
question.
ahead for the exits.
You put a question which have never been raised by the Hungarian government. If you take a look at the government's positions, behavior, the Hungarian population's support for the European idea, values, it's unquestionable. So it's a false argument. It's a false narrative that is being used against us. We are not going to play that game.
But Chancellor Merkel has already suggested that you may have financial penalties to cope with, that the ATM machine is going to be switched off, hasn't she? She's already said anyone who rejects this solidarity, she means the solidarity with the migrants, must accept that this will not be without consequences, including for negotiations over future financial support.
Yet again,
you prepared for that?
You're trying to suggest here something which is simply not true. Again,
I'm quoting you what you said. That's
sure, but what is coming from the Western European countries, what is coming from the European budget to Hungary and countries like, is not a gift. It is to ensure that equal access to the markets, competitiveness, and other issues can be achieved. And for that reason, as a matter of fact, the cohesion fund system, that is the money coming here and mostly going back to Western Europe, is a mutually beneficial construction. Take a look at Mr. Oettinger's words at some point, maybe a year ago. He was very clear about the beneficial nature of the cohesion funds.
But you've got people in your party.
That money is going back to the Western European countries.
There are people even in your party who seem to want to head for the exit. But a man called Zoltan Kovacs, probably didn't pronounce his name correctly. He said in July on a local TV station here, if the EU continues along its current path, then we have to leave the Union, leave this whole scolding pigsty, as he put it. We need to get the hell out, we have to close our borders and let the rest of them rot.
Okay, Mr. Bayer is not member of the government.
Well, he's a co-founder of your party.
Sure, but he
can
have his
co-founder of your
opinion.
Fidesz party.
Again,
he's probably not alone, is he?
If you're trying to put up here a completely misleading and false narrative, and you won't accept...
That's not a false quote, by the way.
No, but you won't accept that there are legitimate claims, legitimate issues on which we have to talk differently, especially in the light of what happened with the European Union for the past 10, 15 years, then you are seriously wrong. Again, when we name problems, when we go for issues which are not with the mainstream in European public opinion, especially the liberal public opinion or liberal political opinion, we like that fight because we believe that's a territory where the fight should be done.
You like a fight also. You like a fight also about Christian values, don't you? You claim to be upholding Christian values.
But you cannot deny the very foundations of European culture, do you?
But you ignore the Pope's call to exhibit those same Christian values and open your doors to migrants, don't you?
Well,
you apparently feel you're a far better Christian than he is.
You also have to know that the religious commands and politics sometimes are in conflict, because your first responsibility when it's about taking care of those who are in need goes for your own people.
That sounds good, but at the same time, you know, he is a leader of hundreds of millions,
again, when we talk about
religious leader of hundreds of millions of people, and you're a state in Central Europe, but you think you know better about religious values and what Christian values are than he does.
Yeah, but we don't talk about...
Which is an extraordinary position to be in, isn't it?
We don't talk about religion proper here. We talk about those foundations on which Europe itself, the continent, and the European Union is based.
But I'm curious, on what basis do you lay claim to being the protectors of Christian values in Europe? On what basis?
Because apparently, especially for the past couple of years, Western Europe is tending to forget what those values mean.
And who are you to judge?
We are not judging. We are trying to portray...
We're not judging.
We are just trying to portray what is happening. And this, you know, if you don't...
What are your religious credentials?
If you don't name a problem, if you don't name that we are shifting away from our own values, and giving up your own values doesn't mean anything good, actually, for the future of the European continent, especially for the European Union. If you take a look at the predecessors, the founding fathers, if you like, of European politicians, they firmly believed that Europe should be based on Christianity, if not religious, proper religious terms, but certainly culturally. And if you shift away from that, it's going to cause very serious problems. Look around the globe. Look around the globe. Nobody's playing that game.
But there's a disconnect. You're claiming to protect Christian values.
Yes.
At the same time, your authorities are accused of illegal action, including denying entry to, arresting, summarily rejecting and returning refugees, using disproportionate force on migrants and refugees, as well as reportedly assaulting journalists. And yet, there you are, standing up, claiming Christian values.
As I see, we do have here a serious linguistic problem as well, because you stick to the word refugees, and we stick to the reality that this is not a refugee crisis we are facing.
Refugees and migrants, then.
These are migrants, asylum seekers, who are part of a larger intercontinental mass migration wave. And we stand here unprepared. Our old tools and methods are not working. And as a matter of fact, we are defenseless in face of what is happening. So the first imperative...
Defenseless in the face of 1,200 people that the EU wants to send.
Well, defenseless in the face of 2 million who came the past 2 years.
Mr. Kovacs, one of the other big bones of contention between Hungary and the EU involves the Central European University, which has been founded by the Hungarian-born philanthropist George Soros. It's operated here for the last 25 years. You're even a graduate of it yourself.
That's right.
You've got a PhD in history. Your Prime Minister has called the university a fraud and accused it of cheating. Did you go to a university that cheats?
Well, I've attended a university which has provided high-value educational support for many Hungarians and many Central Europeans. But we are talking about now, for the past almost year, is not about that. It's about regulations.
Which you've just changed.
To which Central European University and 27 others were not coming up. So when we change regulations, this is a rule of law, that's what you claim that Hungary should be, there can be no exceptions.
But the real issue is not the regulations, is it? The real issue is that it was founded by George Soros, against whom your Prime Minister has a personal vendetta, doesn't he? This is a man who's talked about the Soros plan.
Indeed, this is very interesting.
An action plan that describes exactly how disobedient, non-immigrant Central European countries should be transformed into immigrant countries.
Indeed,
Mr. Soros has got under your Prime Minister's skin, hasn't he?
Indeed, this is a very interesting discussion, because your questions and accusations seem to be reflecting reality, which is not the case. Mr. Soros named himself as a political actor, Europe-wide, but also domestically in Hungary. In a number of previous interviews, as a matter of fact, going back to 2015, they claimed to become a political actor in this country. And if you wanted to become a political actor...
He has views.
But he hasn't got a democratic mandate for that.
But it's not about technicalities of the university. It's about him.
It's not the technicalities.
The reason you're cracking down on the Central European University is because it's him.
You seriously believe that it's a technicality that you need a democratic mandate to become a political actor?
But your Minister of Human Capacities let the cat out of the bag, Zoltan Kovacs. He said, the existence of a strong, autonomous and internationally recognized university is in Hungary's interest, but it's not in our interest to have players in the background who are conspiring against the democratically elected government. So it's all about Soros, isn't it?
That's right, that's what
it's all about Soros. It's not about the university or its regulations or its laws. It's about him.
When an institutional network or elements of it are being used for political purposes without a democratic mandate, we face a serious problem here. Mr. Soros has never been given a democratic mandate. Many of those who work in those frameworks and networks actually he's running, his money is running, have never been given a democratic mandate to represent what they represent. As a matter of fact, they do not simply represent what they do, they go for it. They try to push this through.
But the idea that he's trying to push you to accept migrants.
Yes.
This is a man who wrote, the EU cannot coerce member states to accept refugees they do not want, or refugees to go where they are not wanted. He actually supports your opinion. He's not trying to coerce you to become anything at all, as well you know. Or didn't you read that article?
Mr. Soros has written many things. As a matter of fact, in most of his writings, it's a completely different picture what you see emerging. And that is going back to 2015. And that particular writing or lecture is still available at the internet.
This was September
2015, that's right.
September last year, he wrote
No.
this.
Back in 2015, September, he has suggested at the peak of the migration crisis completely different things. As a matter of fact, he has taken action talking to leaders of the European Union, using his influence through the framework of the Soros network, also the European Union's institutional framework, to make his ideas happen on the ground. And this is really serious.
Very briefly, because we're running out of time. You're going to let this university function?
If they come up to the expectations, yes, of course.
So you're digging in your heels on that?
Look, again, you expect Hungary work as a rule of law. If there are rules, everybody should come up to them. And if other universities, including American universities, are able to come up, then it's a question of willingness rather than capability.
Zoltan Kovacs, good to have you on Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.